Welcome to episode 1, which will be focusing on sustainability and what we can do in our home gardens or home locations. Episode 1 is focusing on sustainability, and you really need to know basic asked questions that we see when researching sustainability and just the general answers behind them.
To understand sustainability, you need to know it's not just a black and white picture. It's more than that. It could be met with how to reduce our consumption of resources.
Exactly. Sustainability is something that can be done in our daily lives, and one way that we can manage our resources is in the realm of water management. And water management just be finding ways to reduce how much water is evaporated out of your soil, or improving your water intake for your garden. So think of when have you ever had a garden?
Technically,
Have you ever had your soil where you forget to water it for like a day or two, and then it starts to get all dry, and then when you water it at the very top, there's like a kind of a layer of water before it seeps down a few minutes later? Yeah. It's because soil, when coming in contact with dry air and being dry for too long, it becomes kind of hydrophobic. In the case of gardens, when you put that water on your hydrophobic soil, if you put it on too quickly, it won't soak in, and your water can turn into runoff rather than going to your plant's roots. And so, you would need to be cautious.
It does sound interesting.
Managing the way that you can reduce this happening to your plants is by adding a protective layer, such as mulching. Have you heard of mulching?
Would you elaborate?
Yeah. So mulching is actually where you have usually a plant material, such as anywhere from wood chips to hay or straw, and it's often chopped up and then put on top of your soil. And the mulch goes into the top of your soil slightly. It helps to break up the soil texture, and it helps to provide shade to the soil. That mulch layer protects your soil from getting baked as quickly. And so if you leave it for a day or two, the top layer will not be nearly as dry. And when you water it, especially if you have something like straw or hay, it absorbs a lot of that water, meaning you won't get as much runoff, and that water will be able to slowly seep into your soil, which is better for your plants.
Is it something similar to how football fields always use fake grass, or how playgrounds always use wood chips?
Sort of. Usually those are synthetic, but it does kind of function in a similar way. So think if they had just bare dirt there, all the water that would run onto that dirt, it would just immediately run off. But since they have that turf grass, and it would just immediately become mud. And so because they have that turf grass and because they have that playground mulch, it makes it so that the water can go to the ground rather than just running off. So that it is kind of similar. Yeah, it is a type of ground cover.
Well, thank you for elaborating on that. So, is there more to sustainability, or?
Yeah, so there's many different types of ways to be sustainable, especially in your own home and in your garden. And one of those ways is by planting native. Honestly, being sustainable is about producing more. It's about getting your garden to be more productive. So by adding more plants to your space, and planting different types of plants that benefit, is a great way to be sustainable, because you're consuming less space and less resources to put these plants in the same environment. And there are many plants that are non-competitive with each other that you can plant so that they'll grow with each other. Like you can plant garlic and onions in strawberry beds, and you can plant basil in tomato beds and chives. And those plants they produce underneath your already producing plants, so they give you an extra layer of production, as well as consuming less resources, because once again you're sharing that water. So you don't have to water individual plants, so you're conserving more water. So multi-cropping is what that's referred to, and that's another great way of being more sustainable with your space. And it enables you to plant more in the space that you have, which is something that I see a lot of gardeners in small spaces complain about. They're worried that they won't be able to produce enough for the space that they have. But by planting multiple different families or multiple different plants in the same beds, they benefit each other, and it really increases your production.
Does it specifically have to be an in-grown garden, or can you use garden beds?
No, absolutely. Garden beds are, I think, my favorite method of interplanting. So in-ground gardening is great because you can broadcast seeds, which is just where you spread them out widely without too much care for them, and it's great for doing that. But rows are great for putting specifically set out plants, 3 in a row planted with 3 different types of plants also in rows, or even just with each other. You can broadcast seeds in raised beds. But raised beds are actually a fantastic resource for interplanting. So we actually in my garden we have we have a raised bed that has tomatoes, it has basil, and it has chives all in the same bed, and they're all producing. They give you a way that you can have better soil. Like if you have in California, we have very clay heavy soil here, and if you have a raised bed, that enables you to have a lot lighter, more sandy or dusty soils as opposed to our very clay heavy soils. So space is better, but using the space that you have in a more constructive manner. So no matter how much you could have 10 feet of garden space, or you could have 10 acres or 10 hectares. But what matters is that you're using that space in a way that produces enough, that produces well without consuming excessive external inputs. So think of like a big field that is constantly fertilized. That with synthetic fertilizers, it can't be considered. I don't consider it very sustainable because you have to constantly be adding to the soil, and you have to you have to give the soil breaks because of the overextending of the minerals. And when you're using up all of the minerals in your soil and you're using up all the chemical compounds in your soil, that's not sustainable because you're leaving that soil depleted, and when you leave that soil depleted, it means you just can't grow on it, and that's pretty much the opposite of sustainability. Making your land ungrowable is the opposite of what you want. So being more sustainable with, no matter if it's big or small, being sustainable starts with caring for your land, honestly. So increased water retention and putting as many plants as makes sense in that location. If there are onions and garlic, they work to repel. Some say this is true, some say this is false. I found it to be generally true. It repels slugs and earwigs from crawling up and eating your plants as often because they don't taste good and they smell strong. So that reduces your bug damage, which also reduces your need for herbicides. So just planting more in the space that you already have. And you could also add flowers to that. You could add, you said a flower bed, but if you were planting tomatoes there, you could plant chrysanthemums or marigolds and keep them short and trimmed, and they won't interfere with the production of your tomatoes or your plants, whatever you're planting there. But you'll get the harvest of a flower as well as a harvest of your food in the same space that you could have planted only 9 things last season.
I see. That is very helpful for like whatever I want to plant in my flower bed. And let's say, for example, it's like a plant bed where it has more space. I can do the same thing, right?
Absolutely, yeah. No matter how much space you have, just finding what plants you can put where. I like to fill up as much space as possible. I don't like to see the soil. So I mulch, and I interplant, and I plant flowers, and I plant vining plants, and I plant cover crops in the off-season.
Thanks for listening to our podcast.
This is Brianna,
And this is Jackson.